what's it been like? And I think the most important thing, we don't want to lose perspective. The most important thing from the church's perspective and from all of our perspectives should be, how do we keep the children and the youth and the adults safe? And, you know, regardless of his status as a member, you know, was the ward or stake ever pulled together and said, we have a verified, confirmed, admitted sexual predator in our midst. Here's what you should all know about him. Here's how you would protect yourselves. Here's what we're doing to protect you. Was there ever a conversation like that in your ward or stake?
Never.
And I think that's the most important thing, right? Even the United States or various states have a registry for sexual offenders where you can look up who's in your neighborhood, who lives near you, so that you can protect your family. Nothing like that is you know, has been done with the ward membership.
Nothing.
I think the chronologically to your comment there, the next thing to share is this past summer, we got a week notice ahead of time that our area authority 70 was coming to visit with us, just the adults, during third hour.
It was just for third hour. And he wasn't visiting any other wards. He came just to our ward.
Okay.
And they did a question and answer session with the adults. So in my mind, I'm thinking, great, we're gonna talk about it. The elephant in the room. You know, we're having a area authority 70 here. I want to hear what they have to say. You know, are they gonna, to your point, John, acknowledge what we have, and are they gonna provide steps to protect us as members of the board and stake? What measures are going to be taking place to prevent possibly things happen again? So that Sunday comes, I'm super excited. Well, sarcastically excited, I guess, because I have a little bit of doubt as, you know, if there's true values going to come out of this. But he opened the meeting, this area authority 70, and just said, "So, do you have any questions?"
He never mentioned Joseph Bishop or McKenna Denson.
Never. From my point of view, I was wanting to so badly just start the conversation and ask poignant questions, but from my point of view, I couldn't. I didn't. You know, I need to be in the boundaries of safety, and so I didn't say a word the entire meeting, and so. After some pause and no one had any questions.
I mean, there was a few questions about, you know, here I am thinking, okay, this is the opportunity for members who have been struggling with this, because I can't believe that we are the only ones, you know, that have a problem or an issue with this. I can't believe that. I mean, you know, maybe we are. Maybe we're, you know, maybe we're the only ones. I don't know. But
you were hoping some members would speak out.
That someone would just say something, you know, and no one did, you know, out of fear, or maybe we are the only ones. Maybe we're, you know, I don't know. And no one did. And so after a short period of time, there were a few kind of, you know, unrelated questions. I don't know if people just didn't feel comfortable or what, but the meeting basically turned into talking about ministering, and he, you know, shared faith promoting stories, and that was it. And then the meeting was over and church was over, and Todd and I were frustrated.
It was just bizarre, because it was the area authority 70 and his wife, stake president and his wife, bishop and his wife, you know, all sitting in the front. And so from the beginning, it looked like something meaningful.
Like something, a big deal.
Like all hands are on deck, you know, we're going to get something meaningful here. But my interpretation of that meeting was, from the area authority's point of view, if they don't ask any questions about the elephant in the room, then I'm not gonna say anything about it, and I'm just gonna go to, you know, preaching mode about, in this case, ministering.
And, you know, we left that meeting just thinking and talking on the way home, like, so, you know, it just doesn't make sense that he would make this special trip to our ward, not visit any other wards. There was no state conference going on, nothing. And to talk about ministering, that's what he came for, you know? And so, again, frustrating.
So this is really important. We've had Stephen Hassan on before, who talks about, you know, cults and unhealthy organizations. And he talks about the bite model, which is that, you know, cults basically control behavior, information, thoughts, and they manipulate people through emotions. That's what the bite is. And so a really important component of an unhealthy organization or cult is that they control the information that the members have access to and the thoughts. And it's, you know, so on the one hand, you're highlighting a real crazy scenario where there's this massive elephant in the room in your ward, because this is the ward of Joseph Bishop, the center of a national, if not international, sex scandal, right? And yet everybody, and it sounds like even including you, either was ignorant after all this national hubbub, international news stories, drama, podcasts, blogs, everything. People remained either completely ignorant that this was even going on, or they were petrified to talk about it, even when they were given a clear opportunity to bring it up. And one of our listeners actually asks, Camille asks, and I don't want to put this forward in an accusatory way, but Camille asked something that came to my mind as well. Todd and Sarah, why didn't you guys actually say something? Were you scared? Were you petrified? Were you staying quiet strategically? Why didn't you guys speak up?
I was staying quiet strategically. I wasn't ready to come out. And that's just.
And
were you fearful? Were you scared about something?
We weren't, well, the main reason is our kids. They're the most important thing to us. And this is a word that we were active in, and our children are active in. And we had a daughter, our youngest daughter, who had watched her siblings and all of her cousins get baptized, that was going to be baptized soon, and a son who was going to be turning 14, and have, you know, received the ordination of teacher. And we didn't want to do anything to jeopardize that for our children. So Todd, even though his feelings about the priesthood have changed, he is respectful of the priesthood, and he didn't want to do anything to jeopardize those upcoming events in our family that you know, we didn't want to ruin that for our children. And that was the main reason why he didn't say anything, or he would have.
Yeah. And, you know, there are a few commenters who are acting a little bit, I don't know, judgmental or concerned or outraged that you guys didn't speak up. I'm just going to say, you know, who's to blame? And how can anyone stand in judgment of parents that want to protect their children? I mean, I think that's what this is all about. And as someone who has gone through a very public shaming with children who were still attending church, it was in many ways harmful and even devastating to my children to be caught in the middle of a public, I don't know, controversy or scandal. It's your friends, it's your community, it's your leaders, it's your social standing, and anyone who's going to stand in judgment of a parent who is going to choose, at least at some point, to be concerned about and or care for their children is sort of not being sensitive or respectful. And I think it highlights how difficult this culture is, because not only, Todd, were you suffering with the faith crisis for years and couldn't tell your wife, it shows how there were probably other members of your ward that wanted to speak up, but because the culture can be so punishing to people who speak out, there's so much fear and so much retribution or perceived risk of retribution that it perpetuates this culture of fear and silence, which is so powerful, but non-Mormons just don't get it. They just don't get how punishing and toxic our culture can be to people who doubt and question.
Yeah, I agree with that. And thank you, John, for saying that. We appreciate that. Again, our kids are the most important to us, and they're kids, and they don't fully understand, and they don't deserve to have that, retribution. And we're at a place in our life now where we feel comfortable, and that time and place is different for everyone, and it's not our place to judge someone else's journey. And so I appreciate you saying that.
And for anyone who feels that righteous indignation to judge Todd or Sarah, I would just say, what have you done to speak out in your ward or your stake or on the internet? And if you have been very vocal, more power to you, and our congratulations. But make sure you don't cast stones until you've kind of looked at your own selves and gotten your own houses in order. It's, ever since my excommunication, people are terrified to like a Facebook post of mine or to friend me on Facebook. So the terror is real.
It's definitely true. We both have experienced that from not only friends, but family members. We've experienced that from liking or sharing something that, that it scares them, or that they consider to be anti, or, we both experienced that for sure.
We both have shared things that we support Sam Young in his efforts. And believe you me, we both have got some feedback from people who don't understand what the hubbub is, they just don't understand. And so we're doing this today. We've shared in the past. I talked to my bishop, I talked to my stake president. So we're all vocal in our own way and in our own time. So. And how that looks for everyone is different. How we choose to speak up or not speak up, or how we choose to deal with it. Everyone's journey is different, and I'm not gonna, think less of someone or whatever because they chose not to. I don't think the members of our ward, if there are any who have the same feelings as we do, I don't, everyone has their reasons, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but I think it's incredibly brave, and I said this at the beginning, that you guys are now willing to speak out, especially given that you still attend and you're still living in the same small, devout, Mormon community that you live in Chandler, Arizona. I served part of my mission. I was actually in the Chandler First Ward. I don't know if you guys know that. I served 4 months of my mission in the Chandler First Ward. Dwayne Sherwood was the bishop at the time, and it's as much. It's kind of like comparable to Salt Lake City in terms of how Mormon. It's a very Mormon community.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So you are taking great. It is a great act of courage what you guys are doing today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so anything else? Like, did your bishop or stake president ever try to silence you? Did they ever make you feel uncomfortable? Did they ever say or do anything that sort of turned the accusations back on you during all this time? They certainly knew you were concerned, right?
No, they didn't. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, not really. I mean, if anything, not so much from the Joseph Bishop thing and our concerns about that, but just Todd had previously turned down a calling. At the time, it was before I knew about any of his things that he was struggling with, and at that time when he turned down the calling, he shared some of the things that he was struggling with the bishop. So if anything, I think maybe we've seen a little bit of ministering from the ward, because maybe there's been talk about that, and not necessarily our concerns about, you know, what's been going on since the recording was released. So we have noticed a little bit of an uptick in, you know, phone calls and, you know, visits and things like that. I think more they're concerned about our family, you know, that kind of a thing.
Well, that's very nice, right? Has that felt nice to you? Or let's give credit where credit is due. If it feels like welcome support and outreach, let's just say kudos to the church. Is that what it's felt like or not?
I will say there are certain members in the ward that are genuine with me and or with both of us and our family, and I appreciate that. The genuine friendship in our ward of certain individuals that I appreciated. And even if our stance being vocal today, I'm sure our friendship will be intact, and I think there'll be a mutual respect still there. So there are kudos to some of the members of our ward for sure, since we've been there.
So some of our listeners are asking, have you ever had direct conversations with other ward members about, you know, this issue, about your concerns, and how has that been? And are there any other ward members you're aware of who share your concerns?
I just know of one, and him and I have talked privately, and he has the same concerns. And circling back a little bit, I remember that my stake president did say he's met with multiple people with the same concerns that I had when I met with him. So my guess is there's multiple people in our ward that feel the way that we feel, but chose to stay silent, and that's their journey, like we've been talking about. So,
okay, all right. So, so really quickly, a lot of people want to know whether you were there when McKenna Denson came and bore her testimony in your ward. But before you answer that, is there anything else you want to tell about your story between, you know, between where you left off and McKenna Denson coming to share?
I don't think so.
Just that, you know, one thing that I told Todd that weekend when everything came out and we were on our anniversary trip, I told him that that I wanted to be wherever he was. So pretty quickly in that short weekend, with the things that he was telling me, I was able to kind of sense and get a feeling of where he was. And I knew after that weekend that he was, you know, it wasn't just he was having questions. I knew at that weekend that he that his feelings about the church would never be the same. And I remember telling him that weekend that I want to be wherever you are. So it might take me a little bit longer, than just now, but it might take me some time, but I want to be where you are. I'm going to be, where you are. We're going to do this together, and wherever we end up at the end of this, is, we're going to do it together. And so for me, for the last 8 months, 10 months, I've been personally going through this, process, and I've come to the same conclusions that he has. And although that might hurt some people, although that might hurt family, that might hurt friends to hear me say that,
we have to be honest with ourselves.
Yes. And and I think that's why we are now here sharing our story, because we are at the point where we need to, move on. And this is kind of like that step for us. So I, proceeded to, over that time period, process everything. And now I feel like I'm at the place where Todd was, when we started this whole thing. So thanks to Joseph Bishop.
And that's a remarkably positive sort of bit of lemonade to this lemon, is that you, Sarah, were able to get on the same page as Todd. And at Mormon Stories and at the MormonFaithCrisis.com, we're not about encouraging people to stay or leave Mormonism. We don't care where people end up relative to the church. We care that people end up healthy and happy, and that healthy marriages stay intact. And so from that standpoint, we're very grateful that you guys are on the same page. Yeah,
I knew that to be happy, it was wherever he was. So
yeah, and that's beautiful, beautiful words. We love that. Okay, so tell us about McKenna showing up in your ward. Were you there when it happened?
Well, this is uneventful, because that weekend we were going to go out of town for a baby blessing. We were all going to go because it was Labor Day weekend, but we live on County Island, so we get irrigation, and our irrigation ironically came that Sunday morning. So I stayed back, and she and the kids went out of town to a baby blessing, and so we both missed it. We missed the visit.
Yeah, but we I think he saw on social media that happened, and he was like,
well, the story is someone shared, maybe it was McKenna who shared from Mike Norton. He did a little snippet preview, and he was doing a selfie outside the church building, kind of walking down the sidewalk. And I said, that is my church. That's my meeting. That's my church building. And then another snippet came in that night, giving more nuggets of what was coming. And then I just knew. And so Sarah was driving back that night with the kids, and I called her, and I just said, I think McKenna Denson came to our church today. And I was like so mad that I missed it, for one. And then I called one of my buddies in the ward to confirm, and he confirmed, yes, that happened. And
yeah.
So we weren't there.
Yeah.
What did you hear about? What did you hear about what happened, or what that was like?
Well, the details were just, a lot of what you just see on, that was released on social media.
For those who haven't heard it, what happened?
It was Fast and Testimony meeting, and McKenna Denson I believe was the first person going up, I think, and went to the pulpit and broadcast to our ward that in our midst was a sexual predator, and she gave her background of who she was and where it happened, and then a member of the bishopric and a member of the stake presidency stood up and helped her off the pulpit, in essence.
And then after that, from what we heard was that it was just kind of, well, what they did was they dismissed sacrament meeting and sent everybody to their classes. And then that was it. It was kind of just like a normal Sunday, and everybody just kind of, was left, feeling like, what was that just happened? And, but they just proceeded to continue with the rest of the day, In the meantime, while that was happening, she was meeting with the bishopric member, I think, or just the state member of the state presidency. And, then after they allowed her to talk, which, he was really, he listened to her. He allowed her to tell her story, and I thought that was good, and they could have, just kicked her off the property, and, but they didn't. And when that was all done, then, from what we've heard, it was just kind of the rest of the day was just.
Yeah. I mean, this one, we weren't eyewitnesses, so we're just going off other people's experiences and just in the video that we've all seen online. So, but the following Sunday.
Well, yeah. So one thing that I was looking for was something, like a mention, it was 5 days later. So it was almost towards the end of the week. There was a letter, email sent to the ward members from the bishop. And basically in the email, it just, talked about that he had been in council that week with the stake president, the stake presidency, the church security, I don't know what it's called. And then also the higher up leaders of the church. I can't remember how he worded it. He didn't say, anyone from the Quorum of the 12, but there were counseling with higher up leaders of the church. And basically, that he apologized for what happened.
Our bishop wasn't there.
Yeah, he was
he apologized for not being there.
It was Labor Day weekend, so a lot of people were out of town. But and he called for a ward temple night, which was the following, just like the next day after he sent that email, Friday night, and then a word fast on that Sunday, which was just a couple of days later. So he sent that letter, and then at church on Sunday, he got up and spoke at the pulpit, and some things that stuck out to me, and I remember this phrase very clearly. He said in his what he was saying was, we would never attempt to cover anything up. And that just really struck me, because here it is now, September, the first weekend of September, and the Joseph Bishop recording was released in March. And obviously now we all know that they knew about this for quite some time before the recording was released. At a ward and stake level, they knew about this months before the recording was released. And now at this point, he's saying we would never do anything like that. We would never attempt to cover anything up.
Now, is this your bishop or stake president?
Bishop.
Yeah.
And I mean, he said other things too, but basically it was that. It was, you know, talking about how, you know, the plan moving forward is they're going to keep us ward members safe, and this type of thing will never happen again. And, you know, that kind of a thing. And we have some law enforcement that are members of our ward. And so I don't know if they still are, but since then, these are men that never wore suit jackets, but now they're wearing suit jackets because they're carrying, you know, protection, you know. And
you're saying there are people bringing guns to church?
Yes.
Well, yeah, just to clarify, these are law enforcement.
Yeah, they're in law enforcement.
They're professionals.
Yes.
It's not the Wild West or anything, but they're, you know, professionals that's their career. So. And
for a few weeks after that happened, they had a Chandler police car patrolling. One for a few weeks was parked in our parking lot. The
Sunday after, when we walked into the foyer, we all know what a foyer is, there was a Chandler police officer in the foyer as we're going to church that following Sunday. So here's my feelings about this. When I saw that, and that day, it angered me. It angered me because in my mind, it should never have got to this point. You know, McKenna should have never needed to go to our church and do what she did. I fully support her point of view and all that, but the church, in my view, should have acted much sooner, you know, from our ward standpoint, you know. It just angered me that we have to do all these things because, you know, better action should have been taken.
Because it wasn't handled when it should have been, you know, and because she felt like she wasn't listened to and that she didn't have a voice for so long, and that, you know, it just should have never gotten to that point. And ward members were, you know, I mean, I don't know what the ward members thought. You know, we've spoken to some, but I don't know their feelings about that. And, you know, it just should have never gotten to that point.
Yeah. And my thought is the church, when there's a PR risk or a legal risk or a risk to the faith and commitment of the members, they'll mobilize very quickly because they want to preserve membership, support, allegiance, faith to the church. But the double whammy of sadness and outrage in this instance is, number one, they don't move at all to protect the children and the youth and the adults from sexual predators or abusers. And to this date, they haven't done anything to let the ward members know that there's a sexual predator in their midst, that, you know, to take accountability and to educate and warn the members to keep them safe. So that's outrageous. And then the double outrage is that they would then have the gall to claim that they would never cover anything up. It just seems outrageous.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like that their actions after that happened, after McKenna came to the ward, their actions were only to protect the ward members from people like McKenna. Their actions were only to protect the ward members from McKenna's, you know. It shouldn't be that way. It should be, you know, where is the protection from people like Joseph Bishop? Where is the protection for, the thousands of sexual predators, whether in leadership positions or, just members of a ward? Where is the protection from them? And I've seen how they, how they handle these things. They acted to protect our ward from McKenna and not from Joseph Bishop. And that's really the only action we've seen.
Yeah. And, this is not isolated. People just on this podcast with just a few hundred viewers, that somebody wrote in and said, my husband was sexually abused by his Mormon bishop. That Mormon bishop, ex-Mormon bishop now, is still serving in his calling in the temple and was never punished for sexually abusing my husband. And the thousands and thousands and thousands of stories that Protect LDS Children and other movements or initiatives just show that the church seems to bend over backwards to just mind-blowingly protect abusers and not report them, not turn them in, not encourage bishops or stake presidents to report, not give them church discipline, not give them punishment, but instead silence or punish the victims or blame the victims or do whatever they can to silence or squelch any discussion to protect the church's name and reputation and money and resources. Again, all at the expense of victims and at the expense of the protection of other potential victims. It's mind-blowing, right? Except if you watch the movie, the movie last year, what's it called? Spotlight, where you can see that institutions systemically, patriarchal institutions systemically protect abusers at the expense of the abused. It's what organizations do, especially patriarchal religions do. That's just what they do, and it's outrageous.
Yes, agreed.
Concur wholeheartedly.
Yeah. All right. So what else do you guys want to share about your story? Anything else to the story? I know we want to talk about this other sexual abuse scandal that's happened in your area, that happened before, that apparently your stake president was a part of. What else do you guys want to do to share to conclude this story?
I was just going to say, as far as Joseph Bishop, it kind of, since September has just been, same old, just, everybody pretending like nothing happened. And, he still gets the same handshakes and hugs at the beginning before sacrament meeting starts, as he did before. And he still gets the same, handshakes and hugs at the end of sacrament meeting, as he did before. And it's just hard, and one important component of this is our children. So we've been really honest with our kids about what we've been going through, and we feel like they're old enough to, understand, but we've also been very supportive of them and talking to them about that, everyone has a journey, and, and they can make the decision for themselves, and we are going to support them in whatever decision that they make. And we've been honest with them about the things of the church that we feel like have been kept from the members. And so here we are trying to teach our kids, and they're passing the sacrament to Joseph Bishop every Sunday. And it's just difficult because I think they're starting to see, these huge contradictions and huge problems, and they ask now, and we appreciate that they're asking us, but they ask, Mom, why, if he's a sexual predator, why is he going to church in our ward, and why am I passing the sacrament to him? And it's hard because we don't have, the answers that, we don't have the answers for them, and so that's been difficult, trying to teach our kids. And we're giving them everything that we can. We're teaching them what we can teach, and then they, are going to make the decisions for themselves. And as long as our kids are comfortable going to church, we will go with them. Now, we don't know what's going to happen after this, but we're prepared for whatever will happen, and our kids are too. Before we did this, we asked our kids what they thought, and we said, if you don't want us to do this, we won't. And all four of them wanted us to do this. And before we left the house this morning, all four of them wished us luck. And so I just wanted to mention that.
That's really powerful and healthy that, number one, this has provided your family with an opportunity to talk about these issues, and also that you're setting an example of courage for your children. That's got to be a good thing to model.
Yeah.
And so congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. So do you want to talk about really quickly this other scandal that your stake president was involved in as bishop years ago?
I will. I'll try to keep it short. It's a very long, if you Google the story, it's, you read the story from beginning to end. It's a bad one. So
it's Susan and Rachel Brock, BROCK, in Chandler, Arizona. I confirmed this to make sure. Go ahead and tell us the high level version.
So the shortened version is this. There was a member in our stake. It's a long story, but a neighboring stake who was two families that were friends, and they spent a lot of time together. They would vacation together, that kind of a thing. The daughter, who was 18 at the time, sexually abused the boy in the family, the other family, and when he was 13. So it started with the daughter, and then about a year later, I think when he was 14, the mom started sexually abusing him, and she it was for 3 years or 4 years that the abuse was happening. She would buy him things. She would pick him up from school, and in the beginning, the family of the boy trusted her because these families were friends, things started getting to the point where they were concerned. They felt like things were not, it wasn't appropriate that she was buying him gifts and that she was taking him out of school and, those kinds of things. And so they were concerned. They had a suspicion that something was going on. And so they went to see their stake president. Both families met with the stake president. And at the time, she didn't admit to anything. And, it was one of those, at least in the news stories that you read, it was one of those that even though she didn't admit to it, everybody still, they left that meeting feeling more suspicious, feeling more like there was something inappropriate going on. But at that time, nothing was done. That, I think, happened in, that meeting happened in early 2010. And so abuse was allowed to continue for a year longer. And during that time, the parents of the boy continued to be concerned. They went as far as to go to the school, the high school, and talk to the principal and say, this woman is not allowed to be around my son. If you see her, you need to call the police, blah, blah, blah. But all the while counseling with their bishops counseling with their bishop. And he, would counsel with them. And this took place over a year since they met with their stake president the first time. Never in that year time when the family was sharing their concerns, their proof that there was abuse going on, never did the bishop counsel them to call the police. Never did he report. It got to a point where the family was feeling hopeless. And finally, after, another year, the father, I think, was the one that finally reported it to police. So later on, when, the news broke and everything was going on and all the investigation and everything, it was found by the county prosecutor. He brought charges against the bishops of both wards of the families involved. The ward of the abused and the ward of the victim, ward of the abuser and ward of the victim. And the county prosecutor found evidence that failure to report, clergy failure to report, and they were going to prosecute them. But something happened and they were never prosecuted. So, it's a long, long story, in depth. Just really, if you read the story, it's just awful, 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 heart-wrenching. This boy's life was ruined, just awful. And the reason why this is important to mention is because one of the bishops, the bishop of the victim, is the same as our stake president. So the bishop that was counseling this family during this hard time is also the stake president that has been at the forefront of this Joseph Bishop situation. And now, this happened 8 years ago. The news came out 8 years ago. At the time, I remember us being shocked, that we've, that this was happening in our stake. And we had a personal relationship with the first stake president that they met with, both families. And I remember at the time, Todd and I being just shocked, but at the same time, there's no way that
the church did not act appropriately.
Yeah, just thinking at the time, there's no way that they didn't do what they were supposed to do in that situation. Just thinking it was, unfathomable that they could have had some hand in, abuse going longer than it should have, or that kind of a thing. It just didn't, it was something that we couldn't we just think, oh, of course they did what they were supposed to do. Of course they handled it the way that it was supposed to be handled. Of course, of course. And, there's a lot more to the story. The husband of the abuser, Susan Brock, was the county supervisor at the time. There was a lot of accusations of covering up going on, all of that. And it's one of those that, like, it's even, worse than something that you would see on TV, on a TV show,
So the church at the time, they denied that the church failed to act appropriately and timely. So they denied the charges, and to Sarah's point before, that the county ended up not prosecuting the leaders of the church. But I would definitely say, in hindsight, that was something that was put on my shelf, at least, that I just couldn't comprehend the allegation, at least, that it occurred.
And so, we had forgotten about this. Because it was a long time ago. And after the Joseph Bishop situation started in March, I just kept, for some reason, that kept popping into my head. And I wanted, it just kept coming into my mind, and I didn't know why. And I kept kind of pushing it out, and, going through my faith transition. But finally, I got to a point where it's like, you know what, I'm gonna research that. I really want to, look at that story again and see what happened there. And when I did, I was just shocked at the fact that these bishops were accused of failure to report. And then I was shocked to read my stake president's name, in the news articles as one of the ones that didn't report.
That was accused of that, yeah.
Yeah, that was accused of that, and just shocked. So it's the same, so not only, are we here we are again, right? Not only that, but he was a bishop at the time, and he's been moved up the ranks,
Almost as if to say that if you handle things the way the church wants, which is to prioritize the strength and the reputation and the resources of the church by protecting the abusers and the church's reputation at the expense of victims, you get rewarded with higher levels of responsibility and leadership as a thank you for handling it appropriately, which in this case means not reporting the ward or stake members that are abusers, and trying to quiet this and squelch these instances of abuse so that members don't know about what happened and aren't protected from future abuse. I know we're filling in a lot of gaps here and connecting dots, but that's because the church doesn't talk openly about these things and connect the dots for us.
Yeah. So, these are things that you can read in news articles from that time. It's a quick search, on social media.
And we shared links. We shared links in the comments of this Facebook live stream. People can click on those links and read about these stories.
Yeah, and
I've asked Cody to include them in the show notes as well.
Bishops were, when they were bishops at the time, they were interviewed, and they gave, statements, and, their statements that they gave were, no, they didn't call police, and no, they didn't advise the family to. And they also did say that they did make phone calls to the church law office, Curtin McConkie. So they did make phone calls to Curtin McConkie, but they didn't make phone calls to
the police,
who they should have, So that's troubling.
And that fits everything we know about the process, that bishops historically have been given a 1-800 number to call, which is not a 1-800 number to provide aid and comfort and resources to the victims, to protect them, to get them therapy, to get them legal recourse, to get them legal protection. The 1-800 number that bishops and stake presidents have historically been provided is a number to Curtin McConkie law firm, where Curtin McConkie tells the bishop, manages the bishops and stake presidents in a way that protects the church and minimizes vulnerability and risk to the church, again, at the expense of the victims.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was important to mention this too, just because this was written right in the news article, and it was a statement that the church made at that time. And this was after the county prosecutor was going to prosecute these bishops. And after they had given, their statements and interviews, and the church statement said, any allegations that church leaders knew of abuse but did nothing is inaccurate and offensive. The church is extremely proactive in its efforts to protect children from abuse of any kind and works diligently to support and assist victims of abuse. When abuse does occur, we work to see that it is reported to the authorities. And I just think, they already had said that they didn't report it, but yet that's the statement that the church put out at that time.
So again, it's just a pattern they keep following, which they followed with McKenna Denson and Joseph Bishop, which is they obstruct and hide and, protect the abusers, and in their public statements, only when forced to make a statement reactively after the scandal erupts, they claim the victim status. How dare you insinuate that we protect the church and abusers at the expense of victims? We do everything we can to protect victims, and we would never do anything to hide or cover up when they are obviously systemically hiding and covering up abuse.
Yeah.
And it's not like any of us get any joy or satisfaction in talking about these things. I am committed in 2019 and beyond to being as healthy and constructive and optimistic and positive and neutral as possible on Mormon Stories podcast. But this has all the evidence of being a very clear-cut, broken system of harm. And so I don't think it gives any of us joy to be calling this out,
Definitely not. But for me, this is my whole, beginning of my whole faith crisis. I believe in my heart of hearts that this is wrong. It's wrong. And I am at the point in my life, and I'm at the point in my faith journey, that I can't be quiet anymore about this. I can't. And, like I said before, I'm sorry if this hurts some people, but I cannot. This is wrong. It's not honest. And, it's right there. That statement that I just read, it's deceiving, and it goes against everything that I have been taught in my life. And it's really hurtful to find out that your church, that your religion is the one doing it. It's hard.
It's devastating. Yeah. Yep. Well, this is not a fun way to begin 2019, but it's a courageous story of a couple that is willing to face reality at a high cost. And what's inspiring about this story is your mutual willingness to speak up about this in the face of potential harm or discomfort that you might face, and the inspiring story of the unification of your marriage and the strengthening of your marriage as a result of going through this very difficult situation.
I think I want to say that we're optimistic for 2019. We're ready to move forward. You know, I love the adage of the primary song: "Choose, do what is right, and let the consequence follow." You know, and we think we're doing what's right and speaking up and speaking out, and we're trying to be as honest and as authentic as we possibly can, while doing it.
And we have to give a shout out to McKenna, who is the reason we're having this conversation and is the source of, will go down in history, along with Sam Young and the Protect LDS Children movement, and all the people that have supported these efforts, and all the people for decades that have been fighting for this. We stand on the shoulders of giants, including Lavina Fielding Anderson, one of the September 6th, who was excommunicated for chronicling a list of ecclesiastical abuse and cover-ups of abuse. She did that back in the late 80s, early 90s. She's a real pioneer. There's so many people whose shoulders we stand on that have made all this possible. But a huge shout out to McKenna Denson, Sam Young, Protect LDS Children, everyone here who's supported them, and of course to you, Todd and Sarah Gale, for being able to add color to the story.
Thank you. Well, we hope what we've shared today has been
Helpful.
worth listening to. I guess you always kind of, you know, are nervous about what you have to say, if that's going to be
Any value.
of value or helpful to someone else. I know that many of your podcasts, and for me, the ones that I really resonated with me and ones that really spoke to me were from couples, husband and wives, and so, you know, that was our hope, that we could, you know, those really helped me, you know, in my journey, and hopefully we can help someone else. And that's all.
Absolutely. Leslie reminds us that there are many, many voices and survivors that have contributed to this movement, including the almost 1,000 people that shared their stories with Sam and Protect LDS Children, and other important sources. I'm pretty sure Sam Young is climbing a mountain today as a part of his 2019 Protect LDS Children movement to encourage people to climb mountains and post flags and summit in support of the Protect LDS Children movement, which then will culminate at some point this year in another march on Salt Lake City. And I know Sam's working on a book, and there are a lot of other things going on. And we know that all these things have culminated in the church already handling these sorts of situations differently and hopefully better. And we hope that this progress continues.
We do too.
Well, John, we just want to thank you real quick and for the opportunity for us to share our story. And I want to echo what Sarah said, that your podcasts have been instrumental in my journey. And, you know, there's a couple that are, you know, that where were you when the Challenger exploded type situation. And there's a few that I remember so distinctly, and where I was and what I was thinking. So thank you. You've done a lot of good for the world, and we appreciate all your efforts.
Well, thank you so much. It's one of the great honors and privileges of my life to help support people in faith transition, and to help shine a spotlight on the LDS Church, to make it more accountable, to make it more transparent, and to help it improve, cause less harm, and to do more good in the world. So thank you, and it's my pleasure. And I have to give a huge shout out of support to donors and listeners and supporters and everyone who has contributed to Mormon Stories podcast and the Open Stories Foundation over the years, because I couldn't have done what I've done without the support of our listeners. So Thank you, and thanks to our listeners and supporters. Anything you guys want to say in closing, Todd and Sarah, or do you feel like you've said it all?
I think we've said it all. I think right now, as for me, and you know, my concerns are always my kids and you know, what our family will do moving forward. And you know, there's definitely no going back now. So I just am curious. You know, we've made attempts to find people who have gone through the same things that we've gone through that are in our area, just so that we can have a more local support system, and with no luck. So if there's anyone out there that lives in the Chandler, Gilbert area, you know, we'd love to meet you. And, I think about my kids, and, you know, that's always a challenge when going through something like this, and wanting, you know, them to have, you know, a support system too, with whatever they, you know, choose for themselves. And so if there's anyone that, you know, we'd love to meet you that lives in our area. I don't know how to quite do that. Email us. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll include, you know, on this, for those listening or viewing, if you go to Mormon Stories Podcast Facebook page and find the live stream video recording of this episode, you know, we've tagged you guys there, so they can just reach out to Todd. Let's see, your Facebook names are Todd Gale, Gale, and Sarah Stuckey. Is it Stuckey or Stuckey?
Stuckey.
Sarah Stuckey Gale.
Yeah.
They can reach out to you through Facebook. I know that there are some great communities for progressive or post-Mormons in the Phoenix, Gilbert, Chandler, Mesa areas. Go to mormonspectrum.org/map, and you can find links in Arizona to these communities. There are a ton of support communities for progressive and post-Mormons. You need not be alone in Phoenix, Gilbert, Chandler, Queen Creek, Mesa, Tempe, etc. So if you guys need it, I will plug you into those communities, because there's a lot of great communities out there and tons of great progressive and post-Mormons out there. We've held some workshops and retreats in the past in the area. Shout out to Carrie Thompson-Jones, who's listening, who I met at my very first Mormon Stories conference in Mesa way back in the day. She says she would love you to reach out. So guys, afterwards, I'll get you in touch with Carrie Thompson-Jones. She's amazing. Cam Leben is saying hi. He's in Phoenix. Ashley Capuni is saying she's in the Phoenix area. I think you guys can expect several people from the area to be reaching out to you shortly. We'll make sure it's a community of support.
We're excited.
Yeah. So check out the comments there, and you'll get plugged in very quickly to a great community of support. And again, thanks to Jeremy and Molly Young, the Mormon wine snobs, who made this interview possible. And they're also plugged into the communities of
Who
support.
knew? He just lived right down the street. We never knew.
Yeah, you're not alone. And for those interested, I one of the reasons I hold workshops and retreats is because it's a way to bring progressive and post-Mormons together face to face who don't know each other. And usually whenever I come to an area and hold a workshop or retreat, it revitalizes and stimulates more community relationships. So for those who are interested, whether it's in Phoenix area or other areas, if you want to hold one of these workshops or retreats, you can email us at mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com. We'll plan a workshop in your area, and we'll stimulate and revitalize support communities. That's part of what we do.
Good deal. We're excited.
All right. Well, thanks again, Todd and Sarah, for joining us. It's a real honor and pleasure. Thanks to McKenna for joining us. Thanks to Sam Young for doing what he's doing. Thanks to everyone who's joined us today and made comments. Your comments on the live stream made this a better interview by far. I want to thank everyone who supports the Open Stories Foundation, Mormon Stories Podcast. Your donations keep us alive. Please go to mormonstories.org and click on the donate button at the top or in the top right. Your monthly donations of 10, 50, $100 a month, whatever you can afford, are what keep this podcast alive. They're tax deductible in the U.S. when you donate to Mormon Stories Podcast, and it makes a huge difference. So please become a monthly donor if you can. We're transparent in our finances, and all the money you give goes to keeping this podcast alive and making it possible to support others. So please support us if you can. Thanks to everyone who does. Thanks to Cody Layton, who produces all this stuff. Thanks to the Open Stories Foundation board that keeps our nonprofit going. And just thanks to everyone. We'll have more cool episodes in 2019. You won't believe the cool episodes that we have in store for you. So just expect more and more Mormon Stories goodness in the weeks, months, and years ahead. We've got great stuff coming. So please stay tuned for more Mormon Stories podcast episodes. Please like us on Facebook. Please give us a positive review on Facebook. Please give us a positive review on iTunes. Please share these episodes with others. Follow us on Instagram and on Twitter, everywhere you can. Anything you can do to support us with social media. Support us again with donations. Keeps us alive. So thanks to our listeners. See you guys again soon. And again, Todd and Sarah Gale, thank you for your courage in telling your story. You're going to help a lot of people.
Thank you, John.
We'll talk to you soon.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you guys and to our listeners. It's going to be a great year.